happened before kids. There was a certain fascination with you being a dad at 83. Did you have any reservations?
Of course I don't want to be around. So, I hope I am. With his guidance, everything's happening. I hope you stay healthy.
If you want to be around for a whole come at 20 past 8. It is now 11 minutes to 8. It's time for the day. The speaker this morning, the Bishop of Blackburn, Philip. Good morning.
I don't care too much about the genre, the programme, or venue, but like countless others, I love the energy and unpredictability of a live music performance. So I was really sad to read reports this week about the steaming decline of live music in the UK, caused by rising costs and reduced subsidies. The Music Venues Trust has claimed that well over 100 live music venues closed last year, which is having a serious impact on grassroots music. And even the big bands and artists have had to reduce the number of performances. There are similar financial issues in the classical music world, where, for example, some dance companies have been forced to replace live orchestras with recorded music. Performances are increasingly limited to the big cities, where it's easier to recruit audiences. The chair of an opera company recently shared with me his genuine fears that large parts of the country will soon barely experience live music. I suppose some might question how serious this is. We've never before had more access to high-quality recorded music than radio listening. So why is the loss of live music such an issue? In my view, it's because live music does something which even the best recording cannot, which is to build up relationships. In the Jewish and the Christian traditions, music has always been used for people to celebrate their relationship with God and with each other. In the Psalms and in the hymns of the early church, believers were able to explore together every aspect of human life, from joy to desolation, while singing with the hope that is found in God. Equally today, with their choirs, organs, bells, and worship hymns, churches are havens of live music. And those standards be there. That music is at its very heart a relation, and the sheer joy of singing becomes a powerful expression of humility that believers find in the God who is the object of their prayers. Music is at its most powerful when it is communal rather than private. And whether it be in a church, a pub, or a concert hall, it is live performance that expresses this relational aspect. A good performance, the distinction between audience and musician, always entirely. We're in it together, bringing the best out of each other, exploring feelings and emotions, dialogue with each other. I think if that were to be lost, the precious aspect of our humanity would disappear along with it. So I, for one, hope we can keep using it.
That was the Bishop of Blackburn, Philip. It's now 9 minutes to 8.
There is mounting international alarm about conditions in Gaza. Large numbers of civilian casualties, the UN says, after days of an Israeli operation aimed at rooting out and regrouping elements of Hamas, especially in the Jabalia area. That's a refugee camp where people displaced by the creation of Israel in 1948 and their descendants live. The BBC and other news organisations are barred by Israel and Egypt from sending teams into Gaza, but we managed this morning to reach 2 Palestinians from there who we've talked to before in this past year. One is Rada Al-Kurd, who told us about seeing the aftermath of a strike on the Al-Aqsa hospital, where Israel says it was targeting Hamas. Tents in the hospital compound were set on fire.
I was shocked yesterday when I woke up at the high sound of the explosion. We could hear it from our home, and then a fire erupted between the displaced tents inside Al-Aqsa complex. The explosion caused a big damage to that area in the western yard of the Al-Aqsa hospital. Al-Aqsa hospital is full of displaced children. For displaced tents, they have their own stuff, they have their own kitchen equipment, blankets, boots, nylons, so all of these tents, and they were beside each other. They were bent, the rooms and the damage that caused this explosion was very, very, very big. I could smell this burning yesterday. It was terrifying and horrific. It was disgusting, actually. All of the tents on this side it was burned. For displaced people, they were killed. Actually, they were burned. And I witnessed some. They said we couldn't do anything for the people who were burned because we couldn't come to the fireplace. Everything was exploded.
Ada, just so I understand this location, there is the hospital, and then these tents were within the compound around the hospital. Is there a walled perimeter? Can you say that the tents are part of this hospital area?
Yes, actually, it's you can say it's big, not too much or big hospital, but at least it's the only governmental hospital. It's still working in the middle area, in Deir al-Balah. And people usually, or displaced people who are coming from different parts, because they came to this complex inside the wall of the complex to save for some safety, to save for some water, electricity, and so on. So they prefer to stay inside the hospital rather to go to another shelter.
Well, we also managed to speak at the last hour to Saeb Al-Zad, who is close to the coast in northern Gaza, not far from the Jabalia camp. He explained what conditions there are like.
It is like you cannot understand the situation, like anything can happen any minute. Yesterday was very bad. Many people were killed in the street, many people were injured, and no even the ambulance or nothing can help them. So it was a very bad day, I think.
And where are you living? What are your conditions?
Actually, we lost our house. We stayed in my sister's house, so we share the house with her. Thank God, her house is still fine.
How close are you to the Jabalia refugee camp, which is the scene, we understand, of significant fighting between Israel and Hamas?
Actually, the gas is so small. That means I am like 8 minutes far from Jabalia with car.
So what can you see or hear of what's happening there?
It is so clear, like we can see the smoke, we can hear the voice. It's so scary. I have tried it. It's quite dangerous. You can see and you can hear how it's going on, and you feel so bad that these people are not allowed to leave. Over there at Jabalia, it's so hard. Like people cannot go out to if anything like. They move like they are there from that children, so their life is so scary and dreadful. But for us, we can go like in the morning. I mean, we can go out. It's not that dangerous for us. But at night, it's so dangerous. Like after 7 p.m., like mostly no one goes out.
Is food still being supplied to the shops around you?
In the market, you can find, for example, only one man who finds or who got meat, let's say, but like the price would be so expensive, and he cannot sell it to anyone, only maybe like few person who can buy it from there, so you can say it's not some. We eat only food in cans, but now most of the cans are missed from the market. You can find it like at least I think a month without entering any fresh aid. But thank God we have bread. It's really fun to us for the very but bread now that we have.
countries away with their frauds and deceptions by losing effective characteristics.
And the notorious Tilly Divine.
She's a bit of a one-off, really.
Lady Swindlers with Lucy Worsley.
Where true crime meets history.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
Coming up in the next hour, former Prime Minister David Cameron and how the loss of South Africa inspired him to champion research into rare genetic diseases.
Listening to Today on BBC Radio 4 with Nick Robinson and Sean. It's 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 15th of October. The headlines this morning. The United Nations has told Israel it won't remove its peacekeepers from any positions in settling. David Cameron has told his programme he was pursuing sanctions against 2 Israeli ministers while Foreign Secretary that was abandoned because of the general election. And the government is looking at weight loss injections could help get unemployed back to work. Here's the news read by Cameron Robbins. The United Nations has insisted its peacekeepers in southern Lebanon won't be moving from their positions, despite calls from Israel that to withdraw. Several UN troops have been injured during Israeli country's offensive against Hezbollah, which is expanded. A suspected Israeli airstrike made the Christian village in the country yesterday, killing 20 people. Neighbours to flash reports.
On Sunday, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu bluntly called the UN to move from its bases in southern Lebanon, which he said were providing a human shield to Hezbollah fighters. The UN is standing firm until peacekeeping said it was essential that the helmets stay in place to carry out the mandate given by the Security Council and insist on civilian operation. Israel argues that the UN has failed to stop Hezbollah from building tunnels, positioning weapons and rockets and missiles in the region, in violation of the European Convention in the past 18 years ago. It says its mission is to support the parties to the conflict, not force migration to their lands, accused of targets on its bases and finally its leaders in the last week. An accusation rejected by Mr. Netanyahu.
Israel has insisted it will decide on how to retaliate against Iran for its missile attack 2 weeks ago, based on its own national interests. The Washington Post says the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told President Biden that he will target Iran's oil nuclear sites, Jerusalem, Middle East, and outcomes.
The 2 weeks Israel fired some 180 ballistic missiles on Israel. The region has been bracing itself for Israel's threatened response, fearing it could prompt a dangerous full-scale war between the 2 countries. The Washington Post article, quoting 2 officials said to be familiar with the matter, reported that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the Biden administration he was willing to opt for a more limited counter-strike targeting military infrastructure in Iran. The Washington Post also suggested that Israeli retaliatory action would be calibrated to avoid the perception of political interference in the US elections in 3 weeks' time. In a brief statement overnight, the Israeli Prime Minister's office responded, "We listen to the opinions of the United States. We will make our final decisions based on our national interest."
The former Prime Minister, Lord Cameron, has told this programme that the government should consider sanctions against 2 extremist Israeli government ministers. He said that as Foreign Secretary in the last government, he'd been examining plans for action against 2 hardline members of Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. Our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman.
This is the first time that Cameron has spoken on the level since his email returns government responsible for the major end. He said that he was in the to the Secretary of Israel to claim that he has and that the UK government must continue to hold military sanctions to defend himself. Which is silenced his own successors to speak to strong signals thanks to Israel. Also, particularly for sanctions imposed on ministers, his last operation
of 6 national organisations responsible for patient safety is to be carried out. Our health reporter Jim Reid has more details.
This review will be carried out by Dr. Penny Dash, who chairs the board overseeing North West London's health management system, and will investigate the role of 6 organisations, including the Care Quality Commission, the Health Services Safety Investigations Body, and the Patient Safety Commission. The review is being announced on the same day the final independent report into England's regulator, the CQC, is published. Again authored by Dr. Dash, he says internal failings and hampered the ability of its inspectors to identify problems in the sector. West Ratings said the government was taking steps to reform the CQC, including appointing a new chief executive.
The BBC investigation has found that the practice of incinerating much of the UK's household rubbish is as polluting as burning coal. Almost half of all household waste goes into industrial incinerators to generate electricity, and recycling rates have stagnated. The government says it's considering the future role of incineration. Professor Hugh Hunt, the director of the Centre for Climate Repair at Cambridge University, told us that it would be better to bury the plastics that can't be recycled in landfill.
We're kind of stuck, and there's getting on 100 of these incinerators now in the UK, with to keep them running for the next 20 or 30 years, and a financial commitment, which doesn't do much for our imperative to reduce waste and to cut down on plastic use, because we've got to provide the fuel for these incinerators.
A Labour MP is bringing forward a private members' bill to seek stricter controls on smartphones for teenagers. Josh McAllister says children need stronger protections in place up to the age of 16, including a ban on phones in schools. He's won the backing of education unions, parent campaigners, and the current Children's Commissioner for England. He told us that other countries are taking action and that Parliament must as well.
If we can create a version of those apps, a version of smartphones effectively from the 16s, it will make it easier for them to clock out and go and do real world activities. You know, we see the Australian government proposing bold measures, the state of New York proposing bold measures, France is taking action. This debate is happening outside of Parliament, and I'm proposing that we actually have a debate in Parliament too.
A report by Peers has found that young people with disabilities are being written off and told they can never succeed in work. It recommends more supported internships and tailored careers advice, which recognises the ability and aspiration of young disabled people who want to work. Our correspondent Dan Johnson has the details.
The report from the House of Lords Public Services Committee describes a prevailing attitude through education, careers advice, work experience and the job market which writes off the potential and the aspirations of young disabled people. It calls for better training and access to workplaces. There's an appeal to recognise the rights of disabled people, their abilities and their desire to work and build a career. The peers conclude that bridging the gap between education and employment is vital. The government has until the end of the year to respond, but says it's investing £18 million in supported internships and wants everyone to fulfil their potential and live an independent, dignified life.
The World Conquer Championships have descended into controversy, with the top judge being accused of cheating. Claims surfaced after he won the tournament's men's competition in convincing style. Vincent McAviney has been finding out more.
At Sunday's World Conquer Championships in Northamptonshire, 82-year-old retired engineer David Jakins was serving as the head judge, or King Conquer, responsible for drilling and inserting strings into the chestnuts. Mr. Jakins, who has competed since 1977, clinched the men's title, knocking out a number of opponents with just one hit. A search of Mr. Jakins revealed he had a replica steel conker in his pocket. Rivals also claimed he was marking the strings of harder nuts when drilling to gain an advantage. He's denied doing this and using the replica in the tournament.
Vincent McAviney.
Caroline, thank you. It's now 8:10. Watching a child who's in pain, knowing that there's likely to be no cure or treatment for them, wishing that science could come to your aid. That is the plight of parents of babies born with rare diseases. There is though growing hope for them, hope created by advances in genetics, and in particular the ability to sequence the genetic code of newborns. Hope being generated particularly here in the UK, where scientists are leading advances in understanding those rare diseases. David Cameron's son Ivan could not walk or talk. He was often rushed into A&E after having a seizure. Sometimes he had those 20 or 30 times a day. Ivan died at the age of just 6 in the year before his father became Prime Minister. And now that Lord Cameron has stepped back from frontline politics, having been Foreign Secretary up until the general election, he's taken the decision to chair an advisory council of a body called the Oxford Harrington Rare Disease Centre. It's a cooperation between Oxford University and a university in Yale in the United States. Its aim is simple: to develop 40 new treatments for rare diseases in the next decade. It's quite an ambition. So when I spoke to Lord Cameron about his work, the work of that rare disease centre, I began by asking whether the memory of Ivan had inspired him to take on the role.
Yes, the memory of having a child where you're obviously expecting all the things you've been dreaming of, and your dreams are shattered when you realise that your child is never going to be able to walk or talk or take part in so much of life. That shock, that sort of stays with you. But I think the other thing is what doctors call the diagnostic odyssey, which is when Ivan was born, over 20 years ago, you had test after test, blood tests, spinal fluid tests, brain scans, observing everything that happened, and still all you really ended up was a sort of description of some very bad symptoms, but no real understanding of any underlying causes. And so what drives me on this is to think, wouldn't it be so great, even if all you get is a proper explanation of what's wrong, that is so much better than so much time spent in these painful situations trying to find out more. And because we think 80% of rare diseases are genetic, actually using the sequencing of genomes to try and get to the bottom of these diseases means that in many cases there might well be treatments that mitigate the symptoms or even cures.
You spoke in the past of the loneliness of knowing there might not be a cure, not be a treatment for Ivan. How different would it be if he was born now compared with when he was born, 22 years ago?
Well, I can't be absolutely certain, but at a recent seminar in Oxford, listening to some of the world's leading geneticists and experts on the genome, I had a real sense that if Ivan was born today, and if all the right things happened, so you immediately sequence the genome, you observe all the other medical data, you look at genomes that are similar to Ivan's, who have similar conditions, there is a chance that you might find either different treatments that could be enhanced, or possibly with all the advances in technology and gene editing and so-called CRISPR treatments, you might find things you could actually change. So I think it really is that exciting. I mean, I sat there thinking, oh my God, if this happened today, he could have had a completely different and much longer life.
Now, it's already the case, isn't it, that Britain's one of the world leaders at genetic sequencing. So this initiative that you are part of, this partnership between Oxford University and Harrington in the United States, what can it change?
Well, what it changes is it brings together philanthropy, venture capital, and the sort of medical and scientific expertise. Because what we've got in this country is great universities like Oxford and Cambridge and Eccles, and this is obviously Oxford's lead. We've got the genomic database that I set up as Prime Minister. It was originally 100,000 genomes, but now we're growing like crazy as we're sequencing the genomes of newborn babies. We've got a very effective venture capital industry. We've got the philanthropy that comes from the UK, but also the US. And crucially, we've got a regulator in the MRHA, which it can be sort of lean and nimble and fast compared with some of its competitors. And it was interesting, listening to scientists saying that this really is the great place to invest in the UK, because actually the regulators are being created, invented and prepared to license drugs more quickly. If we can really make that happen, then that would have a big benefit as well.
Do you believe, because the Health Secretary, the new Labour Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, appears to believe that the NHS is uniquely placed to take advantage of these sorts of technological advances? With the boss of the big US pharma firm Eli Lilly on the programme yesterday, saying, look, it's no use encouraging the science if the NHS itself doesn't then invest in that new technology.
That's right. I mean, the fundamental advantage of the NHS is because it's a single system, as it were, nobody leaves it. So you've got this amazing through-life data. So if you can sequence genomes, back that up with the medical data of patients, you can run that not only immediately in cases like Ivan's, but actually all the way through people's people's lives and marry up the health data with the genomic data.
But despite that, is it too cautious? Is it too nervous? Frankly, after conservative years of austerity, does he not have enough money to do that?
Well, I'd obviously make the point that we increase the NHS budget every year, as you know, Nick, because I've appeared on your programmes many times during those years. But it's always difficult to change, and the NHS does need to do better on data, on digital transformation, and on using patients' data. But it is possible. You know, if we're having this conversation in America, I was a big health insurance company. You know, a quarter of my patients might leave every year, and so it's not always worthwhile to make those long-term investments in patient health, which it can be here in the UK. But as the guy you had on the radio yesterday said, you know, in order to do that, you need the investments in data and digital. So you can marry it up with the genomic data. But certainly the scientists would say a good regulator, genomic database, great universities, the support of life sciences, and a single-payer health system like the NHS, that can be part of the magic formula.
I wanted to ask you a question which I hope won't sound too brutal, but the number of children like Ivan who died when he was 6 years old is very, very small. People might think this involves a very high cost at the time, that there's a vast backlog in the NHS, a very big waiting list. Is this really a priority?
Well, I think there are two answers to that. One is that, yes, these diseases are all rare, but if you look on a global basis, there are 400 million people with rare diseases, so there's a big population of people that can be helped by it. And of course, the Oxford Harrington Institute, it is not really taking public money, it's using philanthropy initially to support what we're going to do, which is come up with 40 cures for 40 diseases over the next 10 years. And that is initially backed with philanthropy. It takes about £20 million to get a good idea from a scientist that we're going to sponsor into a drug that might be available in a doctor's surgery. And initially that money is going to be philanthropic. And then as it gets going, you use venture capital, because all of these drug developments could turn into great companies that would be great for employing people and investing in Britain and all the rest of it. So this is really philanthropy with venture capital rather than lots of public money.
Now, Keir Starmer was talking about this sort of thing at an investment summit yesterday. I wonder if there's a little, putting aside the public politics for a second, that identifies with Keir Starmer. He became Prime Minister after his party had been in the wilderness for years. So did you. He came to be Prime Minister after never having served as a minister. So did you. Do you look at him and think of yourself? Any advice for him?
I did think about this as I knew I was coming on a programme. And actually, there are only 3 people in Britain that have gone from being leader of the opposition to Prime Minister. It's Tony Blair, Keir Starmer and me. So it's quite a small group of people that have made this transition. And as Keir is clearly finding, it's a tough transition because in opposition, you don't know, you have your words, you have your team, you try and put things together, but you have absolutely no power. And there's a huge transition when you come into government, which makes the importance of planning, you know, who you're bringing with you and what you're going to do and what the plan is, and makes it more and more important. But look, I think the investment summit the government are currently holding is absolutely the right thing to do. I'm a great believer that Britain has to attract investment, has to make this country as attractive as possible for people to come and grow and invest. I think the only advice I'd give to Keir is, you know, in government what you find is if you want something to happen, you've got to want it more than anything else. So if you're prioritising growth in productivity, which is absolutely right, everything has got to be bent towards that objective. And there's always a danger in politics that you kind of signal left and then turn right. And I think there's a bit of a danger of that at the moment. You know, saying we want deregulation, which is essential, but we're also going to be making it harder to employ people. Saying we want growth, but saying, no, but we're not going to have any more investment in the North Sea. Those are examples to me of signalling left and turning right, or perhaps the other way around. And you really, if you want to get this economy moving, every part of government has got to be helping to deliver. And the Prime Minister has got to drive it in a very personal way.
Meanwhile, your party, your old party, perhaps we can talk about it now, as you've stepped back from the political front line, are signaling right, aren't they, with that choice of leadership? Has the Cameron project, the so-called modernisation of the Tory party, been binned?
Not at all. I mean, I think actually when you consider, you look at the makeup of the candidates first that were running for the leadership. You know, the idea that there would be, British, black and minority ethnic candidates running for the leadership of the party, having just had Britain's first British Indian Prime Minister. That would have been unthinkable when I became leader of the party in 2005. So to change the makeup of the party, quite apart from anything else, is definitely endured. And I'd say a lot of the key reforms. No, I don't really. I think Rishi did a great job in saying, I'll stay on and let there be a debate and let different candidates come forward, because, you know, we need to be able to see them debating, arguing, making speeches, making mistakes, having good days and bad days. That's all part of politics. So I'm going to stay out of it because I want to help and support whoever wins. But I think we had a strong lineup, and I'm looking forward to seeing the result.
David Cameron, Lord Cameron, thanks for joining us on the Today program.
Thank you.
If you were listening about an hour ago, you will also have heard Lord Cameron's views on the Middle East. He explained that Britain's Foreign Secretary had been considering sanctions against some Israeli ministers, and that he believed that this new government should pursue the idea of sanctioning those ministers. We're going to be discussing that after the film in about 10 minutes' time.
It is now 21 minutes past 8, and it's more than 50 years since being Michael Corleone in The Godfather made Al Pacino famous. Now 84, he's publishing an autobiography, and he certainly doesn't suffer from a shortage of material for it. His other films included Scarface and The Scent of a Woman, for which he won an Oscar. His book is called Sonny Boy because that's what his mother called him, and he's been talking to our entertainment correspondent, Colin Patterson.
Autobiographies. The actress Drew Barrymore put tears at 15, St. Michael Cyrus was 16, Al Pacino 84. Why?
I don't know why. Well, I'm here. I'm still here. Enough has happened to me. But that could possibly be interesting for someone like me.
Are you thinking about legacy as well?
No, I haven't thought about legacy ever. I don't even think about being old, actually. But I feel it.
Do you?
When I wake up.
The autobiography deals a lot with family and fatherhood, and you became a father again last year.
Oh,
How
yeah.
have you reacted to that?
Well, it's extraordinary. Wonderful. You know, I have this little person who talk. I played a harmonica with him on the video thing. And we have made this kind of contact, so it's fun. It's fun to have 4 kids now.
There is a certain fascination with you being a dad at 83. Did you have any reservations?
Of course I do. I want to be around for this time. And I hope I am. You know who his dad is. But things happen. I hope I stay healthy.
But one shocking revelation in the memoir is that Al Pacino had a near-death experience when he collapsed during the pandemic.
Well, I opened my eyes. There were 5 paramedics in my living room. There were 2 doctors who looked like spacemen. And there was an ambulance in front of my house. I thought I died because there was something, then there was nothing.
There was no white tunnels.
No white tunnels. No, nothing. It's like Shakespeare said. To be or not to be. No. No more. Any way you want to say it. Chirping all around, you start to feel, I don't think I wanted here. I didn't know what I was doing, right or wrong.
But they were losing patience.
Oh yeah. So Francis put that so-and-so.
This is the gun in the toilets of the restaurants.
That's right. And they liked the scene, and that was it.
Who were they going to replace you with, do you think? Could you see anyone rocking around?
Bob De Niro comes to mind.
Do you honestly think they could have replaced you with him for the first one?
Yeah, sure. Why not? You know, how they replace him.
You want to play with? Say hello to my new friend.
Scarface. Even as I say that, you start smiling. What is it about that?
I don't know, man. It's powerful.
It's not powerful. Wishes the best actor Oscar was from that.
Yeah, I would have liked to be
hold back. You're very honest. 2011, basically, I'm fine. I was out of money. I was gone. My account was in prison because of the coincident money you were spending. $400,000. How does that happen? You gotta be dumb enough. But the line was down, and I worked.
He admits that he has taken roles simply for money. One thing he won't do, voices of children's cartoons.
I tried. I just can't. I can't bring yourself to do it on your own. I just can't. One of the great things about us, but next time I do coaching classes. If I can, seriously, don't do
Al Pacino, $400,000 a month for spending that. Well, it takes some work, can't it?
Yeah, I'm sure I could probably manage that actually. Always enjoy starting the day with cricket though. It is day one of the second test between England and Pakistan. England's men started well. It's lunch here in town. Let's head straight to check for an update.
They did start well, Carthy, but Pakistan have battled well to make it to 79 for 2 at lunch. Remember, there's so much chat about using the used pitch, and Jack Leach in the spinner was into the attack early. He took 2 wickets inside the first 10 overs, but from 19 for 2, Saim Ayub and the debutant Cameron Gouda have added 60 for the second wicket, and the pitch has largely behaved itself. Pakistan is 79 for 2.
England's women are hoping to join Australia and New Zealand in the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup. England can do that by beating West Indies today, and I've been speaking to the England captain Heather Knight about how important momentum will be at this stage of the World Cup competition.
Yeah, hugely. God, performances have built over 3 games actually. The first couple of games in tough batting conditions were a little bit scrappy, and there's a couple of ways to win really. And Parker Ego a little bit of time when it was hard to hit balance from the back end. Yeah, use our physicality and rank 1 to 2 to get over the line, and then obviously the game was Scotland was conducive to how we normally want to play. I think being quite aggressive, taking the game on. Yeah, and obviously we changed venues for those first games with the line. Interesting to see how it plays there, and hopefully we can keep the place a really strong performance.
The schedule for you has been interesting. England had a bit of a break between matches. How important then is match rhythm when you are facing different conditions, different pitches each day?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one actually. I've never had 5 days off in the middle of a World Cup before. It was quite strange, and then obviously got our 2 games, final group games in quick succession. It was a bit weird yesterday actually. We were leaving for our match, and Bangladesh were leaving for the airport to go home. So I think what having our games late in the group stages does mean if we do make the semi-finals, hopefully we'll just be able to concentrate on one game at a time, not think too far ahead, because the turnaround is very fast, and sometimes that can help you because you're not thinking too much about what you've got to come.
The World Cup moved from Bangladesh to the UAE just 2 months ago, so 10 teams have been staying in the same hotel. You mentioned that Bangladesh were leaving, when you're all getting ready for your next matches. It sounds a little bit awkward, that situation at the start of the World Cup, but did that create a different atmosphere?
There's a lot of awkward lift meetings, I would say, having 10 teams in the same hotel. You run into people a lot, and breakfast is pretty busy if you go at the wrong time, but usually there's a few different venues if you stay at different hotels, but obviously with the venues being very close, we're all staying in the same hotel. So yeah, a bit of a weird one, a few awkward sort of hellos in the lift and things like that, but it's not too bad.
And I know you were trying to get to a Kasabian gig on Sunday night, so you needed a fast win against Scotland, but joking aside, during the World Cup, how important is it for you as the England captain to mentally switch off occasionally during what is a long competition?
Yeah, really important. Just to check that we're trying to get it finished to get to the early, but it's one of the good things about being an England cricketer. You get to go to different places and have opportunities to do different things. And I'm big Kasabian fans and love my rock music, so being able to go and see some live music during the trip is really cool. I dragged a few of the girls along with me, and they had a really good time. I think it's very important to be able to switch off from cricket. It leaves you fresher when you do come back and more focused, and maybe if you're sat in your room thinking about cricket and using up your energy that way.
Well, I hope it works. Good luck against West Indies. Thanks very much, Heather.
Thanks, Carter. Cheers.
England captain Heather Knight. Just a few other headlines this morning. Wales had a 1-0 win over Montenegro in football's Nations League last night. Scotland faced Portugal tonight. 7:45 was commentary on 5 Live, and Northern Ireland host Bulgaria. The top European leagues and players' union, FIFA, has filed a legal complaint in the European Commission against the sports governing body FIFA. They claim FIFA has abused its role under European competition law with an overloaded and unworkable international football calendar. Henrietta Knight, they trainer of three-time Cheltenham Gold Cup winner Best Mate, who came out of retirement last year to return to training at the age of 76, has had her first winner since then, Cotswold Cottage out of Windsor. And New Zealand now have a 4-0 lead over Great Britain in Sailing's America's Cup. It is a best of 13 race series. If you are mathematically challenged at this time of morning, New Zealand now need 3 more wins to win in Barcelona.
Thank you very much, Kathy. And now what is coming up?
Hi, I'm Kirsty Young, and I'm to tell you that Young Again, my podcast from BBC Radio 4, is back. Today, I'm in conversation with a world-renowned physician who firmly believes that our present health is inextricably linked to our past experiences.
So, what do I experience? I experience that the road is a dangerous place, and that's downloaded into my nervous system for the first year of my life. Then I experience abandonment.
In this edition of Young Again, I'm in conversation with Gabor Mate. Join me this morning at 9 on Radio 4 and BBC Sound.
Looking forward to that, Kirsty. Quick look at the weather today. Cloudy for most, with just a few sunny spells breaking through at times. Rain arriving at the West Leader in the late breezy of
Today on BBC Radio 4, the United Nations has defined Israel as peace ambassadors of Lebanon, several UN troops and refugees during the Israel has held retaliation against Iran for hosting BBC investigation has found that incinerating household waste in the UK creates as much pollution as burning coal. Household waste now goes into industrial incinerators to generate electricity. Rising plastics being thrown away has driven up increase in emissions.
Caroline Country. This month, in David Cameron's interview with us this morning, he said that while he would not have restricted some arms sales to Israel as the current government has done, concerns about it, it was as policy choice and other action policy in Israel.
Before I left office, I was working on sanctions on these two ministers, Minister Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. When you look at what they say, they have said things like encouraging people to stop aid convoys getting into Gaza. They've encouraged extreme settlers in the West Bank with the appalling things they've been carrying out. And so actually saying to Netanyahu, yes, we support your right to self-defense. No, we're not going to end the sale of arms. But actually, when ministers in your government who are extremists and behaving this way, we're prepared to use our sanctions regime to say this simply isn't good enough and has to stop.
It didn't happen, Lord Cameron told us, because then the general election was called. Now, the two ministers concerned, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, are both still serving in the Israeli government. The BBC's approached them both for comment. Jeremy Bowen, our international editor, joins us. For those who are unfamiliar with these two and why Lord Cameron calls them extremists, Jeremy, can you explain?
Well, they are extremists. Itamar Ben-Gvir is the National Security Minister, so he's in charge of the police. He had many lawsuits against him, but in 2007 he was convicted of incitement to racism and supporting a terrorist organization. He was a supporter of a banned organization here, which was formed by an extremist rabbi. So he was found guilty for carrying signs that read, expel the Arab enemy. Rabbi Kahana, that was the man he followed, was right. The Arab members of parliament are a fifth column. 20% of the population of Israel are Palestinians, and he clearly sees them as, potentially guilty men. And as for Bezalel Smotrich, he's a massive supporter of the resettlement of Gaza, among other things, by Jews. There were Jewish settlements, quite big ones, in Gaza until 2005, when they were pulled out by the then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, something which the settler movement always felt was a massive injustice. So he sees a huge opportunity now to get Jews back into Gaza. These two men are significant because while they were very much fringe characters at the last election, Netanyahu persuaded them to get together so they had enough votes between them to get over the they had to get to a certain level of votes in Israel's proportional representation system. So together they did, and therefore that helped him get his majority. So they're in the cabinet, they've got very good jobs. Smotrich is the finance minister, plus he has a lot of responsibility for what happens in the occupied territories. So between them, they essentially hold his fate in their hands, because they've said repeatedly that if he does things that they don't like having a ceasefire with Hamas, then they will bring down the government. So they are very influential figures in Israel, and while centrist Israelis don't really like them very much, the fact is they're very important politically.
Jeremy, stay with us. I'm going to bring in Tom Keating, who's the director of the Centre for Finance and Security at the Military and Security think tank, RUSI. Tom Keating, this is not a new idea in the sense that it has been proposed by the EU's top diplomat. There were reports at one point that the White House had discussed it too. But how big a move would it be for a British government?
Well, I mean, the UK has, since Brexit, tried to find ways of demonstrating independence with its sanctions policy. So this clearly would be a significant move. There is a global human rights regime, which I think probably is the regime that Lord Cameron would have been looking at. But, I think it would clearly be a major political message that the new government would be sending. That's, after all, what sanctions are, generally a political messaging tool.
Because other individuals who the Foreign Office called extremist settlers have been sanctioned. This was in David Cameron's time earlier on this year. Is there any precedent you can think of for sanctioning elements of a government to which you are allied?
Well, in that regard, it would clearly be an extreme move. So no, there is not a precedent I can think of. And I think it's also worth bearing in mind that the Sanctions Directorate of the Foreign Office is heavily overworked at the moment with issues related to Russia. And of course, getting these sanctions right, getting the evidence packages together to justify the sanctioning takes a lot of work. So I think it's a practical issue in all of this as well.
Jeremy, what impact do you think it would have if it did happen? There's been no word from the Foreign Office this morning about Cameron's comments, although David Lammy, in opposition, push Conservatives to condemn what he called the extreme and dangerous rhetoric of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir.
Yeah, I mean, their rhetoric, things like encouraging so-called voluntary emigration from the Gaza Strip, has been used as well, quoted by people who say, look, this is more proof that Israel is interested is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip against Palestinians. While these two men are controversial among people who don't support them, i.e. people who aren't on the hard right of politics, I think there is a mood in Israel at the moment where there would be quite a bit of resentment if an ally tried to, as would be seen, interfere in Israeli politics. I think there would be an element of people saying, look, this is our choice. These guys are democratically elected. They're in a democratic government. What on earth are you doing sanctioning? And there's another issue too, I'd say, which is that while traditionally, because of the proportional representation system in Israel,
I think we might have lost Jeremy there, but I think, Tom Keating, you're still with us. You were talking about the Sanctions Directorate being quite overloaded at the moment, but in the past, when these kinds of measures have come in, they've been both financial and travel, which rather assumes that people have assets the UK can reach or are planning to travel here.
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, historically, as I said, sanctions have been a kind of foreign policy messaging tool. Whether they have assets here or want to travel here is in a way secondary. Now, of course, these are Israeli ministers, so a travel ban, I'm sure, would have influence, because there may be occasion where they want to come to the United Kingdom. But fundamentally, although the sanctions over the last 2 or so years against Russia have been about causing an impact on the Russian economy, here we'll be talking about messaging, and that's a political decision that David Lammy and his office would obviously be making.
Tom Keating from RUSI and Jeremy Byrne as well, thank you.
It's now 20 to 9. The UK is critically vulnerable to another energy crisis that could see price spikes. That's the warning coming from an expert study, the Energy Crisis Commission, set up by the Energy Industry Citizens Advice and the CBI. The chair of the commission is David Laws, former Liberal Democrat Cabinet Minister and chair of the trade representative body Energy UK. When I spoke earlier, he told me why he believed this over.
Our commission and indeed the IMF
up in the world, and therefore over time, experts judge that this energy transition to more renewable forms of energy is going to be better in terms of the consumer and industry experience in terms of prices in the future.
And as a former Treasury Minister in the coalition government, as a Liberal Democrat MP as you were at the time, would you therefore be prepared, if you were in government now, to borrow a great deal to promote that switch to renewables, and indeed one of your other recommendations, which is much more home energy insulation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that on the first of those points, the extent to which government needs to borrow in order to fund capital investment, there may be some useful things that the government can do, particularly in relation to infrastructure, but most of this investment in the supply side will be done by the private sector and probably should be done by the private sector. And I imagine Rachel Reeves would not want to take on all of the costs of funding all of this. So having predictable government policies on the supply side in relation to renewables, having rounds on this thing called contracts of difference, the way that the government incentivises investment in renewables is incredibly important. And actually the start that the new government has made in this area has, I think, been quite impressive on energy supply. Where we've really failed as a country over time, and I include the period where I was in government, is in doing things like greening our housing stock, reducing the demand for energy, switching our cars away from oil and petrol to electrification. We've been slow to do that. Policy interventions have constantly changed. Policy direction from government has been unsteady, so that consumers haven't had clear signals about what they're expected to do. That issue of reducing demand is probably the next big challenge.
Let's end with a third of your 3 points, recommendations for change. You want better support for people who can't afford their energy. Just reflect a little on that argument about winter fuel payments for the elderly. Do you think in the end we don't spend the money on people who really need it and do spend money on people who don't?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, during in particular the recent energy price crisis, 71% of the UK government support for consumers was not targeted. So it went to people like you and me who, probably grateful for support but didn't really need it. It did go to those people in poverty. And the winter fuel payments has been going to lots of people who also haven't needed it. The problem is abolishing it has also involved taking money away from some people who are still on very low incomes, actually in measured poverty. So it's only really been half a solution. And the government still needs to do much more to figure out how in the future, when we get energy price shocks, we target the support that is available on those people who really need it.
David Lawson speaking to me. Now let's turn to Henry Zephyr, because in the last few minutes he has been interviewing the Prime Minister. Henry, what came up? Did he talk about the national insurance employer contribution going up?
It didn't want to, but I based it. And crucially, the Prime Minister gave his view on the dispute that I was talking about with Nathan 630, which is what precisely did the Labour manifesto before the general election say about national insurance. Some people say that the manifesto gave the impression that a Labour government would not increase national insurance at all, either the employer rate or the employee rate. Keir Starmer has for the first time indicated that he agrees with Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, who was speaking about this yesterday, and Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, who was speaking about this on Sunday, that the only commitment the Labour Party made before the election was not to increase the employee rate of national insurance. I'd say that is as good as confirmation you will ever get in the run-up to a budget that this government is going to increase that employer rate of national insurance.
That sense of does it break the promise is one aspect of this. Another is the impact that it is going to have on employers. And we did talk to the CBI about this earlier, who made clear that it is going to be difficult for employers, or at least some employers.
Exactly, and arguably it sits in tension with what the Prime Minister was saying yesterday and what in fact he was spending most of this interview I did with him talking about, which was about how this government wants to encourage business investment, to make the country a better environment in which businesses operate. And he would argue there's no tension there, that businesses accept that the UK is in an economic predicament and that some taxes will have to go up. But that is the fine balance that this government is clearly going to have to strike, finding a way to make the UK an attractive
what they say is a £22 billion black hole that they have to fill.
Henry, thanks very much.
13 minutes to 9 now as Ukraine continues to be under Russian drone attack almost every night. Network of volunteer patrols become an integral part of the effort to protect the country and to patrol its skies. With most men of fighting age called up to serve, it's an effort that is increasingly involving women, as our correspondent Sarah Rainsford found out when she joined one patrol who call themselves Witches of Bucha.
When Russian drones swarm over Kiev, their sound is unmistakable and it's nerve-wracking. Then, usually, comes the boom of Ukraine's air defences. The number of drones is increasing. So one night, we went on patrol with a team of volunteers who are helping the Air Force to protect the skies in the Bucha region, just outside the capital.
There is a total of 25 drones at the moment over Ukraine.
So the mobile air defence team have just stopped their car ahead of us about 200 metres. Just got out, we're walking through the middle of a pitch black field up a dirt track towards them, where they're getting into position.
The unit call themselves the Witches of Bucha because, with one exception, they're women, stepping up now that so many men have been deployed to the front lines. Ukraine is short of weapons too. The machine guns that the witches are assembling were made in 1939. They have to pour in bottled water as a coolant.
Максимально в темноті, щоб не виявляти позиції. Це раз. Він може спікірувати на світло.
So Valentina's saying that the drones could see the light, could respond to that. They don't know how the drones are going to behave. So they're saying we need to work in the dark, essentially.
Of course, it's nervous work because we need to be focused to react to the slightest sound.
Valentina is a vet. The commander, Yulia, has a day job as a manicurist. Her team have downed 3 drones so far. She says there are more in the air these days. And when I ask why, she shrugs. I think they want to kill us. The women joke a lot here, but they're all from Bucha. And at the start of the all-out invasion, they lived under occupation when Russian forces killed and brutalized civilians here.
Я пам'ятаю, як ми були в окупації.
Valentina tells me that experience is what's driving her now.
Я пам'ятаю весь цей
I remember all that horror.
жах. Я пам'ятаю крики своєї дитини.
I remember the screams of my own child. I remember the dead people when we were fleeing.
Вбитих людей.
That's where I find the strength to go on.
Я це все пам'ятаю, ніколи не забуду.
It's what motivates all the women. So much that the Bucha witches spend their weekends doing more military training. This was them learning to storm a building, crunching through the ruins of an old farmhouse. There's a fair bit of back chat, and their gun skills are not entirely convincing yet. But the women are learning fast, and they call this empowering.
Захотелось хорошо оружием владеть.
Anya is an office manager who tells me how she felt totally useless during the occupation,
Бесполезность своего существования.
unable to defend her family, and that was terrifying.
Давно ця думка, що треба допомагати.
And this is Ina. She's a maths teacher.
Плачеш, страждаєш.
You cry and suffer for the people who are no longer here, those taken by the stupid war.
Війна.
Then they were recruiting women here, and I tried it and didn't fall apart.
Не розвалились. Це поки не розгорається.
Back at base camp, Valentina stokes the fire in her hut as rain hammers down on the roof. She's on patrol duty, waiting for the next air raid.
Нас много людей в Покровске.
She tells me the men who used to defend the skies here are now in Pokrovsk in the east, where the fighting against Russia is fiercest. So we try to smile and stay cheerful, she says. But we're just waiting for them to come back alive.
Sarah Rainsford reporting from Ukraine. It's coming up now to 7 minutes to 9. Playing football, learning to coach football can make prisoners behave better and improve their chances of being rehabilitated. That is the finding of new research by Oxford University into a project which provides prisoners with regular sessions with football coaches from the Premier League and the EFL. Dr. Martha Newsom led the study, carried out by the Changing Lives Lab Group in the Centre for the Study of Social Education at Oxford University, and David Dean founded the charity that is involved, the Twinning Project. He was the former co-owner and vice chair of Arsenal Football Club and is credited by many people with setting up the Premier League. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
David, tell us about the Twinning Project. What inspired you as a football man to get involved in it?
Yes, when I left Arsenal after about 24 glorious years, mainly glorious years, I had a bit of time on my hands and I was invited to go on a speaking circuit in schools, which took me around many state schools around the country, and that morphed into speaking in prisons. And actually I've been to 117 prisons in England. And when I was going around the prisons giving what I'd like to think of my motivational talks, I was thinking, well, what is football doing in prisons? Nothing. And I came up with this idea of the Twinning Project, where we twinned a professional football club with a local prison, and the club will put in their coaches and in some cases referees to help the offenders to learn something, to get a skill which will help them on release.
It's not just playing, they are learning a skill, though.
They are actually learning a skill. They're coming thanks to the FA, who designed a level 1 coaching badge. The offenders, after the end of the course, can come out with a level 1 coaching certificate, which sets them on the pathway to something bigger and to give them something worthwhile to do.
And Dr. Newsom, when you studied this, what did you find?
The big finding that's come out this week is that behaviour improves substantially. So we found a 50% drop in adjudications. These are hearings for offences committed while you're in prison. They fell by 50% for Twinning Project participants compared to a control group, and that was controlling for a whole host of factors: past behaviour, age, ethnicity, all sorts. It really seemed that this intervention was the difference in making behaviour change.
And this intervention is different, forgive me, from any other activity, working in a kitchen, because the argument often made about prisons, there just aren't enough staff to do any rehabilitation work.
Well, what we found is that the key to these behaviour changes is social bonding, feeling a sense of connection, a sense of group with other Twinning Project participants. That was the driver of the behavioural change and improvements to wellbeing, which we know improves the whole environment for staff, which is critical as well. Now, this is promising for reoffending rates. We're waiting for that data to come out in a couple of years, but it is a promising start. And that social bonding is powerful in football because the football family already exists. You can't find a more loyal bunch in the football family, so it's a really great starting point to build those bonds.
And David, do any of your old friends, colleagues in the football family say to you, hold on, prison's supposed to be punishment, they should be having fun and getting the opportunities that perhaps lots of kids who are out there simply don't get?
See, I think that's right. I think going to prison is the punishment, where people lose their liberty, they lose their self-respect, they lose their job, invariably they lose their partner. Prisons should be for rehabilitation, because no matter what the crime is, the offender will be coming back to join society, so let's make them better people. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, it's a fascinating project. Thanks for talking to us about it. While we've got you, David, as I said, you are often credited with creating the Premier League. Do you worry that it is now facing something of a civil war, this major legal case around the way football is funded? Manchester City facing charges about taking what some people see as suspect sponsorship deals. Your old club Arsenal now facing charges that it has taken interest-free loans. Do you worry about the future of the league?
Yes, indeed. I think the financial fair play in PSL is giving a tremendous problem. You can see what's going on. The clubs are arguing amongst themselves. There's litigation going on between the league and the clubs, between the clubs and the clubs.
about Manchester United and Arsenal with him. I know he's a serious football fan. There are people who think the whole idea of a football regulator, initiated by the Conservatives, of course, but then adopted by Keir Starmer, is going to do grave damage to the Premier League. Do you?
Well, of course, it was brought in really by the ill-fated Super League. And that came about several years ago. I think that really, when the fans found their voices, I think that probably promoted the regulators. But now it's going to happen. It's got to be embraced. There's no question about it. There's no turning back.
But get this wrong, and the Premier League is in real trouble.
Well, about real trouble, I'd like to think that the game will always survive the fact that it is it's the number one sport watched around the world. And the Premier League, the players, the product and the field is still fantastic. The Premier League runs at 98.8% capacity. That means virtually every stadium is full, every game.
David Dean, I've got to leave it there, I'm afraid, but thank you for talking to us about your twinning project at Dr. Martha Newsom of Oxford University.
That's it from us, our editors Laura Cooper and Jack Evans. The studio director was Shona O'Donoghue. After the news, Young again. Good morning.
BBC News at 9 o'clock. The United Nations has defied calls from Israel to withdraw its peacekeepers from southern Lebanon. Several UN troops have been injured in incidents as Israel continues its military offensive against Hezbollah. Sanctions against two Israeli ministers. Been examining the investigation against two hardline members of Bethlehem cabinet accused of encouraging violence against Palestinians. The government has looked whether weight loss injections could get unemployed people back into work. It's agreed a multi-million-pound deal with a pharmaceutical firm which will fund a trial about whether the new treatments can help. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer says the idea would also benefit the NHS.
This drug will be very helpful to people who want to lose weight, need to lose weight. Very important for the economy so that people can get back into work. Very important for the NHS because, as I've said time and again, yes, we need more money for our NHS, but we've got to think differently. We've got to reduce the pressure on the NHS.
There's been a slight fall in unemployment. The jobless rate fell to 4% in the 3 months to August, down from 4.1%. The figures from the Office for National Statistics also show that pay grew at its slowest rate for more than 2 years over the same period, raising expectations of a cut in interest rates next month. A BBC investigation has found that the practice of incinerating much of the UK's household rubbish is as polluting as burning coal. Almost half of all household waste now goes into industrial incinerators to generate electricity, and recycling rates have stagnated. The government says it's considering the future role of incineration. A Labour MP is bringing forward a private members' bill to seek stricter controls on smartphones for teenagers. Josh McAllister says children need stronger protections in place up to the age of 16, including more restrictions on apps and a ban on phones in schools. BBC News.
This is Radio 4, where today we'll take in the broad sweep of what it is to live on planet Earth. In half an hour, why analysis of your genetic code could be crucial. The great Leslie Manville is on Woman's Hour at 10. What's so funny about Saturday Night Live? Screenshot is in a couple of hours' time. Russell Tovey, actor and art lover, has been exploring surrealism on Tuesday afternoons. This week he asks, are we all surrealists now in an increasingly outlandish world? That's at 4 o'clock. First, a renowned and sometimes controversial trauma expert looks back at his life.
Hello, I'm Christine Young. Welcome to Young Again, the podcast that asks fascinating people what advice would you give your younger self. Today, I'm in conversation with a world-renowned physician who firmly believes that our present health is extremely important to our past experiences. Trauma, he says, is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you. Being born into a Jewish family in the Nazi occupied was truly an environment. In this edition of Young Again, I'm in conversation with Gabor Maté. And welcome, Gabor. And first of all, thank you for this movie, All Species. It's called The Myth of Life. I usually pick quotes, and I have never read a book where I haven't been able to interview the author and read its main quotes. I mean, it's almost comical. There was a point at which I thought every page page I'm turning down, every page I'm marking up. I mean, you specialise in trauma, illness, and healing. For people, what is it you're trying to tell them?
Well, it's the recognition, not just philosophical recognition, but the actual scientific fact that everything is connected to everything else. You can't separate individuals from their environment. You can't separate individuals from their multi-generation, from their history, culture that they grew up in. And you can't separate the mind from the body. You can't take it away, and that's the fact. So that whatever happens to the individual, it's not just a manifestation of a certain organ, it's actually the manifestation of the entire life. That is affected by multi-generation.
About those origins, and I want to sort of root myself, people who are listening, in your experience too. You say in the book, we each carry our wounds in our own way. So what were the greatest injuries that you carried with you from your early years that sort of affected your life?
So I was born in a situation where I'm not even sure. That's very great. So, my descendants are very much. My father's away before slavery. She has a job. I might say it's more than a job. So I grow up with that unconscious sense of fear of abandonment and of having to prove the value of my existence because I can't be valuable on my own. Otherwise, then we will be right. Those are the ones.
Your mother was a most biased because her was the worst conditions possible. She herself was an infant that was born into less than this.
My father's away in forced labor. She doesn't know if he's better off.
So how does a person, how does a mother have those moments when they are surely doing their best to do anything other?
My mother could not have done it.
So it's an unavoidable.
That's an unavoidable stress.
So it's just on the basis that this one goes on again. If you were to talk to your mother as she was in your circumstances, what advice would you give? What would you say to her to make things better for her and to make things better for your baby?
You're talking about extreme circumstances that are imposed from the outside. There's not much she can do to change those circumstances. There's not much she could have done. If she had kept me, I would have died. So there's not much advice I can give to somebody under such dire severe. What can I tell my mother in Gaza right now under concentration? I tell them. But that's not how I write the book. I write my books for people living in their everyday culture who are facing stresses but may have some choices if they were well informed. So my attempt here is to inform parents and others to do that. Okay, here are the circumstances, but there's some choices you can make.
So really, under those dire conditions, I can't advise people.
One of the things that I find very sobering in the pages of your book, you say, children, sensitive ones especially, compared to your ones, wounded in multiple ways, not just by bad things, but by good things not happening. You're a father of three.
Yeah.
I'm a mother. I felt immediately stressed out by the idea that you kind of think most of the time you're absolutely trying to do your best. You drop the ball on multiple occasions, but it's not just dropping the ball. It's that you're not getting what you think you're not getting precisely what you're not constantly. What is it we should be doing as parents?
So look, given the theme of the program, that was founded. If I could talk to myself when I was a young parent, I would say deal with your internal emotional issues before you load them onto your kids, because automatically you will. I was never I did that.
progressed, obviously.
Yeah, I never thought of my work compulsion as a nation until I became
And what were the other things?
shopping. So I was compulsive classical on my desk buy, and I mean, that's an eviction fund. I can define eviction